There we go. Fantastic. Welcome everyone to our March edition of our Teaching Tuesday. To all of our police and fire retirees of Ohio. This is the ambulance taking you for a ride program. And today, just a couple of housekeeping types of things. We do encourage you to have a pencil and a paper because we are going to give you a lot of good information today. Things that you can use to make some decisions on in the future, and maybe, just to even analyze maybe some programs you already have in place. We do ask that, this is a listen only mode. So if you do have a question, please locate at this time there on your menu bar. There should be a little thing that says Q&A. You can type your specific questions into there. Jim and myself will be monitoring that, and we'll be able to answer your questions as we go through today. And then also the other thing that we always strongly encourage folks to do is to have a benefits review. If you've not had a review especially the last year, please take your phone out, put the camera mode on, hover over the little QR code right there, and then you can actually send your request for information in there, and then either Jim or myself will be contacting you to do your benefits review or answer very specific questions. So we do want to make sure that everyone is familiar with all of these things. We are recording the program today, and it will be on the website for PFRO. There's also a page currently on there, so you can easily register for all of our Teaching Tuesdays coming up in the future. And then the video archives will also be listed there. So my name is Bonnie Norris. I'm one of the district managers for the Association Member Benefits Advisors here in Ohio. And also with me today is Jim Kane, the other district manager here in Ohio. Morning, Jim.
Good morning.
And many times we get the question, what exactly is AMBA, or what does it stand for? AMBA is the Association Member Benefits Advisors, and we actually serve associations from coast to coast. Right now, we have a relationship with over 80 different associations. Here in Ohio, we're very fortunate to work with not only the Police and Fire Retirees of Ohio, but also the Ohio Retirement for Teachers Association, the School Employee Retirees of Ohio, and the Public Employee Retirees, Inc. And one of the things that we do, we help to solve problems for the associations and their membership. So anytime any one of those associations comes to AMBA and says, hey, this is a problem our retirees are facing, we need a solution. So AMBA goes out, scours, finds a solution, brings it back to the associations, and then their boards, their executive directors, they really vet it, dig down into it, say, is this the solution that's going to help our retirees? And then what Jim and myself do really on a daily basis is help to make sure folks understand how their benefits work, what it covers. And, folks, at the end of the day, we don't want any one of our retirees to say, oh my gosh, I wish I would have known that. And we sure don't want you paying money that you don't have to, or missing out on any of your benefits. So again, that's why it's so important to schedule those benefits reviews so you can maximize and leverage your benefits. And as I said earlier, my name is Bonnie Norris. I've been with AMBA for nearly 8 years. I'm actually located down in Southwest Ohio, near Oxford, or Miami University, as some of you may know. Live here on the family farm with my husband and of almost 30 years. And he says, it feels like 30 minutes underwater most of the time. And then we also have a son who's a junior at Miami. And Jim, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good morning. I've been with AMBA servicing Ohio's retirees for 10 years, working with police and fire retirees the last 5 or 6. I began my career as an EMTA, then an EMTP, and it was just a little too much for me. And I ended up getting into the other side and the benefits aspect of healthcare. I also ran nursing homes, home health agencies, and rehab centers for 22 years prior to assisting Ohio's retirees. So, whether it's regarding medical transport, whether it's regarding, any medical or Medicare event, if you're challenged with how to navigate Medicare, Bonnie and I are wonderful resources. There's very little we haven't heard. And if we don't know the answer, we certainly know where to find it. So please feel free to leverage us if you're ever in time of need or want to kind of protect yourselves before that happens.
Absolutely. And Jim, one of the favorite parts of the morning for me as we do these seminars the third Tuesday of every month is really hearing about our associations and what's coming up. So Gary, I know that a lot of things have been happening. We have a new office for PFRO, and there's several things that I know the board and yourself and Missy have been working on. So please give us an update.
Hi, Bonnie. Thanks for having me here. Let's see. News updates. We'll start with the legislation, House Bill 512. That's where our bill is requesting that the cities contribute more to the pension system. We have, I think, 12 sponsors now, and it looks like the bill is going to move forward. It may or may not pass this year, but at least it's moving forward. It's the first time since 1986 that we've actually been able to get these cities to at least talk about increasing their contribution. Of course, they're crying poverty and that they can't afford it, but all the cities are flush with money right now after the COVID pandemic, so it's not going to hold water too well. So hopefully we can get something accomplished this year. Membership in the organization is up slightly. We'd like to see it increase. I'd like to see it double, but we'll patiently move forward and get every member that we can. When we talk to the legislators, they listen. The more numbers you have, the longer they'll listen and the harder they'll listen. So numbers are important. Other than that, all I can ask is that you get your dues in. I'm sure Missy has sent out dues to just about everybody on the website. So hopefully you'll join the organization and we can get some things accomplished.
And Gary, I know one thing that's coming up that I always look forward to every summer is the play ball. So Missy told me that's going to happen on July the 15th there with the Columbus Clippers. What are some of the benefits that come out of the play ball event?
Say what? The benefits are we get together, we get to have face-on-face time with our members, and we spend a day with them and enjoy a ball game. And we get to listen directly to them and what their desires are as far as the organization. And they listen to us and see where we're taking the organization. So it's an enjoyable day, a relaxing day, and it's fun to be able to join a group of people and enjoy yourself.
And the
kids and families. Yeah, the kids and families love it. I mean, we attended last year. It was a gorgeous day, and it was wonderful to see how all the wives and kids and even grandkids participate.
Yes, the kids, they enjoy the ball game. The grandparents enjoy being with the kids. The parents are glad the grandparents have the kids, so everybody's happy.
It's a win-win-win. And if I remember right, some of those proceeds go toward funding the scholarship fund for PFRO.
Yes.
And then also pays for the tickets for some kids who maybe would not be able to attend a ball game to actually attend with the police and fire retirees.
That's correct. We send out 4 tickets to each member and ask them to either purchase them or to sell them. And then we have 4 drawings throughout the year. We draw 4 winners each quarter, and they win $1,000. The salesperson wins $100, and the remaining money goes toward scholarships for kids. Well, not just kids, high school seniors. We go through college. We go to tech schools, even nursing schools, something like that. And all you have to do is be a member to sign a form saying that, yes, you did authorize this person to use your name in the contest, and you're lucky enough, you get drawn and you have a scholarship.
Fantastic. And it's such a great and fun event for everyone. So please make sure, I know Missy's going to be sending out information and also be on the website. So hopefully we can see everyone and invite your friends and your former coworkers. And one of the things that Gary talked a lot about this morning was just all of the different legislative action. So remember, when we have these programs or when we're meeting with folks, many times Jim and I receive the question, well, what's my association do for me, or how does it impact me? So obviously from what Gary shared with us, your association truly is your pension watchdog. You know, they have Greg working as the legislative liaison. You know, he's in the offices every day. Your board is attending the state meetings, working with your legislators. And the other thing is too, remember, they're helping also to help preserve those health benefits. And, you know, throughout programs like the play ball and your local chapter meetings and other events that are going on, a PFRO can really help connect our retirees to the local community. There's many different types of things that happen, everything from, you know, maybe sponsoring local events or serving as volunteers during that outreach. And then really where Jim and I come in and AMBA is to help offer those important and exclusive benefits and discounts. And so we've truly enjoyed, you know, our webinars, and we started these about a year ago. And it's a great way to really educate members on all of the benefits and discounts that you do get just by being a member of PFRO. So one thing, Gary, that I always like to say is, you know, membership has its privileges. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about today was just, you know, some of those benefits and privileges that you do have by being a member of PFRO. So remember, you know, the benefits that your association brings to you can really help fill the gaps that maybe aren't covered by your benefits that you do have. And with our PFRO folks, especially, many of you move out of state. So, you know, do the things that you have when you retired, were they able to port with you? Were they portable when you left in retirement? And if you have moved out of state, were they able to go with you? Many times we can extend these benefits to your parents or family members that they can take advantage of the group negotiated discounts here. And also know that, you know, many of these benefits can actually help prevent you or a loved one from having to take either extended time off or use your retirement funds to care for a loved one in need. And the program that we're going to talk about today, or the specific benefit, is called Medical Air Services. And we wanted to extend our thanks for everyone joining us today, because this can actually be one of the things that is almost like a gotcha. You know, there's many cracks to your nest egg, many threats against your nest egg. And a lot of times we always say, you know, with unexpected medical bills or medical transportation bills, you know, that's one thing that can really go in and crack your nest egg. So Jim, what are some of the specific things we're going to cover today?
Good morning. Well, first of all, I want to make sure we're not, you know, scaring anybody. We just want to make sure you understand where there are gaps in Medicare. A lot of our retirees have this false perception that Medicare is going to cover everything. And unfortunately, there's been a series of cuts in excess of $700 billion that have cut several services, and some that honestly haven't been covered since 1979. Members just don't realize them until they deal with an event and they get that bill. So today we're going to talk about, you know, the issues and costs of emergency medical transportation, whether you're on major medical or Medicare. We're going to share exactly where the level 1 trauma centers are in the state of Ohio. So you can kind of take a look, because again, and we'll go over this, but Medicare is going to cover you to your closest hospital. In most cases, cover most of that bill, unless you're on an Advantage plan where you're going to have some skin in the game. But if you have to go to a secondary or tertiary, excuse me, hospital, unfortunately, that's where we start getting the bills. And we'll talk about the myths and realities of insurance and Medicare, what they are indeed going to cover. How to have that peace of mind, knowing that if you deal with an event, you're not going to be straddled with a big bill. And then obviously, if anybody through this wants to discuss your benefits individually, you know, that's something we can do, you know, confidentially or one-on-one with you virtually via Zoom or even on the phone.
And Jim, like I said earlier, it seems like we can't pick up a newspaper or turn on the television that we don't see these unexpected medical costs being discussed, or the question being asked, you know, why doesn't my insurance cover? So I think this program today was very timely in that. And I just happened to be looking and this video from one of our Cincinnati stations, one of their stories came up. So I thought this was a good way to sort of set the groundwork today. So allow me to share this. Hopefully all the technology works.
Welcome back to 644. We know that no one likes being hit with an unexpected bill after they have to go to the hospital. But consumer reporter John Mattery shows us why some of the biggest surprises come right after an ambulance ride to get there.
I've reported on surprise medical bills for years. Well, this year, Congress is finally taking some action to stop them. But there is one notable exception, and it could hit you with bills for hundreds, even thousands of dollars. Last March, Donna Rosado found herself in a serious health emergency, was rushed to a larger hospital by ambulance.
I went to the emergency room where I suddenly became unable to breathe. I was put on a ventilator for 10 days, and I spent a few weeks in an ICU.
The good news, it wasn't COVID-19. The bad news, Donna got home to a pile of medical bills. You might be surprised to learn that her biggest bill had nothing to do with the hospital visit, but rather was for the ambulance ride, which was not covered by her insurance. A recent study found more than 3 out of 4 ground ambulance rides could result in an out-of-network bill. They're not part of new legislation called the No Surprises Act, aimed at eliminating surprise medical bills.
If we're protecting patients from surprise bills once they get to the emergency room, why not protect them from the surprise bill on the way to the emergency room?
Ambulance companies say they provide costly, labor-intensive services, and insurance reimbursements are too low for them. So what can you do? Ask your insurer to review the claim. Then contact the ambulance company and ask them if they can lower the charge.
Talking to my insurer did the trick for me.
A few East Coast states have passed limits on what ambulances can charge, but Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana are not among them. So always, don't waste your money. I'm John Matteries, WCPO 9 News.
So folks, we never want anyone to waste your money. We don't want you to be blindsided by any unexpected bills. And, most importantly, we don't want you missing out on anything or spending money, obviously, that you don't have to. So hang on just a second. So that's why we're going to, cover to make sure that no one is actually blindsided by these unexpected bills. That, as John Matteries talked about, there have been some legislative things that have happened to protect consumers. However, there still are some gaps. Many of you out there may, have a medical coverage that you think covers it. We want to explore that today, give you the information. You may already have another program in place. So we're going to cover some things today so you can actually look into that and make sure you have the coverage that you thought you did, because again, we don't want you to be blindsided. So Jim, at the base of all this really is, who pays the bill and why aren't they paying the bill? So Jim, how does Medicare and all of this work together?
Yeah, this little graph you're showing is actually from the Congressional Budget Office. It details how the $716 billion that were cut from Medicare between 2013 and 2022 and where those cuts came from. Now, a lot of people want to know, well, where did these cuts come from? Well, there were 2 major factors that impacted 2013. Number one was the Affordable Care Act. Secondly, the baby boomers started turning 65. Those 2, for the last 10 years, have had a major impact on Medicare. And these are the cuts. So hospital services, $260 billion. If you don't understand how that impacts you, look into observation days or, ask us about it. Medicare Advantage rates or deductibles, Medicare provisions. The areas where Police and Fire Retirees Ohio have helped is addressing the bottom areas. And the areas where they've cut $66 billion in home health or $40 billion in nursing home, or today's subject, the other services, is where you're going to find $33 billion in cuts in medical transport. So understand that if you dial 911, Medicare is going to cover you pretty much 100% to get you to that closest hospital, no matter where that is. Some townships will say, we're going to cover you to that closest hospital, and that's in my local taxes. That's wonderful. Medicare is still going to cover that trip. But if they say, hey, we can't handle Jim Kane, he's got to go to Columbus, he's going to Cincinnati, Toledo, Cleveland, Akron, one of the major trauma centers, that second trip I am now responsible for. Medicare does not cover advanced life support. And again, some of these changes are major shockers to our members when they end up, dealing with an event and having a bill. So as you see on the left, between the green and the blue, women take significantly more medical transports than men. Why is this? Men are typically a little clumsier and a little more hurting themselves. It's because women live 3 years longer. The older we get, the more apt we are to take a medical transport. Statistically, we'll each take 3 medical transports from some event to the hospital after age 65. The 5 primary reasons folks will take medical transport, number 1, number 2, have always been heart attack and stroke, cardiac or pulmonary event. Number 2, or I should say number 3, if you will, is typically a traumatic event, car accident, any type of injury. Then you've got neurological disorder, could be a head injury, Alzheimer's, dementia, a stroke where you're losing consciousness. And then the most recent they've added, falls have always been an issue, but respiratory distress. COVID has, jumped this into the top 5. And it's actually got a stronghold on number 2 or 3, I believe. But just understand that, the older we get, the more apt we are to actually take transports. So as you look at this little graph, the reason it's so expensive, there's an article that under that, it talks about how these companies are justifying their overall expense for the maintenance of the fleet when it's not being used. But more importantly, like I said, we will take 3 visits between ages 65 and death on average. 23% of us will take a visit between, or ambulance ride between 60 and 69. 29% of us will take an ambulance ride between 70 and 79. 39% of us, my eyes are horrible, 39% of us between 80 and 89, and then 53% of us 90 and over. And a lot of people are saying 90 and over. Believe it or not, folks, 22% of men, 33 or maybe 34% of women now are living well into their 90s.
And Jim, it's not just the ambulance rides that can be expensive. Obviously, we have folks out here that probably worked on, as first responders. And, how many times did a helicopter have to be called in? And maybe never really gave much thought to, wow, how much does that helicopter cost? Because they're usually operated by a third party person who really does not qualify to be governed by any type of price structure. So basically what I'm trying to say is the ambulance can charge what the ambulance, or the air ambulances can charge what the air ambulances want to charge. And this was an article that was in the New York Times. There was a lady in Butlerville, which is down here in Southwest Ohio in Warren County. She ended up in an accident. They had to call the helicopter in, and her bill, as published here, was over $22,000. Now, who wakes up in the morning and says, whoa, I'm going to spend $22,000 on a few minutes in the air, and then they have to pay for it. Unfortunately, this couple couldn't handle it. So, the company placed a lien against their house, and they actually ended up filing bankruptcy. So you can see here, according to the article, their Air Methods was the company that operates here in Southwest Ohio. And, their average bill was over $40,000. And folks, that's $40,000. And, as Jim said, they can cite, maintenance fees, the cost of airline or airplane fuel, having a very highly trained staff on duty 24/7, just on and on and on. One of the things to keep in mind is that, and again, talking about ground ambulance, the further you live away from a hospital, your bill is probably going to be more expensive, because many times the ambulance companies are going to charge a per mile rate. Well, mathematically, the more miles you live away from the hospital, the higher your bill, because if it's 10 miles times something, that's a lower number than 20 miles times some number. So just remember that the farther you are away from the hospital, the chances that you're going to have a more expensive transportation cost. And then also keep in mind, where are those trauma centers? And we talked about that earlier, Jim. And just remember that trauma centers, as many of you are probably well aware, differ. Not every emergency department is the same. There are level 1s, which are usually associated with the teaching hospital research. They have many specialists on duty 24/7. Level 2 trauma centers are very similar to level 1s. However, they may not have the research facility or as many specialists. The level 3 trauma centers, there's no specialist. They can basically stabilize you for transport to level 1 or level 2, and they may not have a 24-hour emergency department. And then finally, our level 4s are more along the lines of clinics. They can handle minor injuries or get you stabilized to go on to a higher level trauma center. So here in Ohio, and I know we have folks that are currently residing outside of Ohio, and I strongly encourage you to figure out where your local your nearest level 1 trauma center is. But here in Ohio, we can see that there are 12 level 1 trauma centers in the state, and that's represented by the red dots here. So, you know, we have St. E's in Mahoning County, we have up in the Cleveland, Akron area, around Toledo, and then obviously Columbus. Dayton has Miami Valley, and UC down in Cincinnati. So that draws, you know, a lot of the tri-state end up at the University of Cincinnati, as that's our level 1 trauma center. So one of the things that we often get the question from our retirees is, well, why am I not covered by my insurance? And folks, many times that starts with the type of insurance that you have. Actually, there was one article from a news program out of the Chicago area where 3 siblings were in a car accident and they were all transported to the local hospital, but they received 3 very different bills. And that's because they were picked up by 3 different carriers. They were in networks at some point, some they were not, some were covered by Medicare. So every medical insurance does work differently. So we do encourage you to figure out, you know, the coverage that you have, how does that work?
I'm looking at her right now.
How does that work with, you know, your current coverage? So also look at the term usual and customary charges. So, hey, Gary, could you mute?
Did I mute?
Could you mute?
If I could find the button.
Okay. So again, as we look at usual and customary charges, that's how the industry classifies the bill that you get. And the Medicare language itself can be very tricky. As Jim said earlier, a lot of times Medicare will cover you, you know, on your first trip to the local hospital. However, they do have a little bit of language that is a little tricky, and I'm going to go over that in just a slide. And then also know that if the provider charges more than that usual customary rate, guess who gets to pay that bill? Folks, that's you, the patient. And then also remember that those coverage demand depends really on the services or the seriousness of the ride. Because, you know, the insurance carrier could come in and say, well, you know, you could have gone by taxi, or someone else could have driven you, or, you know, even call an Uber. So again, it's very important to understand how your coverage, your medical coverage really treats ambulance and emergent transportation bills. And here, as we look at the Medicare New Book, and folks, this is on page 31, you can, you know, pull this book out of your file cabinet. It's right there on page 31 and talks about the ambulance services. So Medicare actually will cover ground ambulance transportation when they say that you need it. And they may pay for things like the airplane and helicopter. But again, it all comes back to after the fact, they have someone reviewing your charges, and then Medicare will make the decision if it was truly medically necessary according to their standards. And just remember, you pay 20% of that Medicare approved amount. And folks, if you're on an Advantage plan, I strongly encourage you to review that, or, you know, contact Jim or I, and we can sit down and explain the program that you're on, because many times with the Advantage plans, you do have co-pays, deductibles, and those vary from in-network to out-of-network. And a lot of times what we're seeing now is that the carriers may not be in the network. And Jim, there's a couple other differences that happen within the actual ambulance ride.
Yeah, Bonnie, you may not be aware of this, but you were using the example that Medicare may pay. We just had we handle the benefits for retired teachers and public employees and school employees as well. We just had a retired teacher, about 75 years old in Gahanna, that went out with the last snow to get her mail, slipped on her porch, fell in her yard and into a bush, broke her wrist. Neighbor saw her, dialed 911, ambulance came, took her to Mount Carmel East, and she got a bill for $1,230 for that medical transport, and Medicare declined it. It was a wrist injury. She could have taken a cab, Uber, or the neighbor could have taken her. It wasn't even that cold of a day, and they just said, hey, this was a, you know, blatant decline for $1,230, and she's and now she's getting it paid by MASA. The only reason we know about it is because she has the MASA plan and they're reimbursing her the $1,230. But just understand, you know, again, that term may is really at their discretion, and unfortunately not always in our retirees' favor. So the difference between BLS and ALS, Medicare covers BLS, which is basic life support. ALS is not covered. The easiest way to remember is if you dial 911, Medicare is typically going to cover that first trip closest hospital because that's what's picking you up is an EMT. That's going to include CPR, artificial ventilations, oxygen, basic airway management, spinal immobilization in the event of an accident, vital signs, bandaging, splinting, obstetrics, glucose, diabetes monitoring, albuterol for lung treatments, but that's about it. When you get into EKG, manual defibrillation, airway advanced management or advanced airway management, external transcutaneous pacing, the fluid therapy, needle chest compressions, administration of any critical care medications, IVs, I mean, it's on you. And typically that's your second trip to get to a trauma center and then potentially get to wherever your, procedure destination and or back home. Again, all on us, which are often a surprise to our members until they get the bill.
And Jim, unfortunately, when we're having an emergency, it's our emergency, we dial 911. We're not thinking about, oh my gosh, what is this going to cost me? Is this going to be covered? Is that going to be covered? Will this be in my network? Not in my network. I mean, we dial 911 because we need help. And, obviously, sometimes it's after the fact when we're kind of hit in the face. So, and I've even known retirees where, he woke up in the middle of the night, not feeling well, woke up the wife, said, oh, just drive me. I don't want to pay the ambulance bill. And unfortunately, in that one situation, he was having a massive heart attack and actually passed away on the way to the hospital. So that's like the worst possible thing that can happen. So obviously, the association does have a program that can give peace of mind. And folks, maybe you already have a program in place. Many times we run across folks that do have a program either through a travel association or another association that they're part of. What we want to do today is just make sure that you understand what is available to you through PFRO. And then also, so you can compare it to what you maybe already have in place. And also start thinking about, oh, what does my coverage with my medical insurance cover? So Jim, talk to us a little bit about this Medical Air Association.
Well, first of all, every time I see MASA and then the four associations, I kind of laugh because as Gary knows, it's hard to get any two boards to agree on anything. And MASA is one of the few products within the state associations that not only police and fire retirees, but Ohio Retirement of Teachers, school employees, and public employee retirees have all, endorse and recommend. So MASA stands for Medical Air Service Association. And just like their logo says, any ground, any air, anywhere, any expense you incur based on medical transport, that's not covered by Medicare, no matter what the situation globally, except Syria, Ukraine, and Cuba, they are going to take care of. So they're the pioneer in the industry. Once Medicare started making cuts in the early 70s, the medical transport industry began regulated by the FAA instead of Medicare or the healthcare situation. So they realized the reason or the need. They've got 2 million active members and counting. They're fastest growing in their space, rated A+ superior by AM Best. And excuse me, they've been in business 43 years. And again, there's no dollar limit. Bonnie and I have seen, retirees with $55,000, $65,000, $75,000 claims coming back from, Hawaii or other countries. Bonnie, this is your favorite little graphic. So you want to talk about this?
Because, even though it says Medical Air Services, MASA really pays the most claims for emergent ground transportation. So that means, and this is one of the folks, one of the things, folks, make sure if you do have another program in place to ask the question, when does that program kick in? Because with MASA, they actually cover bills, if something happens in your bathtub, in your backyard, it's going to cover any of those expenditures you have from right there at home. You don't have to be 100 or 150 miles from home. And, just keep in mind that the majority of the bills that they are paying is for this, emergent ground transportation within a 20-mile radius of your house. And, these bills are real. And I know that we've got folks out there, especially with our PFRO members, you ran squad, you taught people how to run squad. You've been in these situations, but the bills are what get folks afterwards. And, just as we saw in the video earlier, and, these are classic examples of, where, the amounts can change from either the ambulance company or the municipality, from one company to the next. And then obviously it can be impacted by how far you are from the hospital that you're being taken to. And one thing that Jim talked about earlier was, for Medicare to pay, you have to be taken to the closest hospital. And that's something that sometimes people don't realize, because they say, oh, I want to go to this hospital because that's where my doctors are. Just remember that if you're not going to the closest hospital, that is a reason that your claim can be declined. So, here we can see, a 20-mile trip, a rural mileage trip was over $1,300. A 9-mile trip was over $1,000. And then as we, go forward here and look at a couple others, here was another bill for just 4 miles. It was over $1,300. And then obviously the cost of that air ambulance. This was one, that happened. It was a Blue Cross payment. The total charges was over nearly $42,000. And unfortunately, they had a balance due of over $8,000 even after their insurance. So again, that's a big chunk out of your nest egg. And as Jim said, the coverage really extends worldwide, as long as the country you're visiting isn't, on the naughty list, if we will, by the Department of State. However, some things happen right here in the United States. And this couple, they lived in the Villages in Florida, took their bucket list trip to Hawaii. He ended up having a massive stroke, and all said and done, by the time they got him back home, the cost for the air ambulance was nearly $60,000. MASA did help them arrange for that transportation and paid 100% of that bill. And here's an example from one of our Indiana retired teachers. Her husband had to be life flighted to a hospital, and the hospitals in Indiana are even more spread out than they are here in Ohio. Their bill was actually over $38,000. And then this was one of our teachers in Urbana. Her husband had a little incident with a chainsaw, and a 17-minute trip to Miami Valley had a price tag of $21,000. And MASA actually paid for each of those bills. And again, usually what happens is, you get your bill, and you can either, like the lady in the video, start calling to negotiate that and get that reevaluated and a different price, or get the bill taken care of. Or for our folks that have MASA, in those incidents, we just take the bill, send it to MASA, and they take it from there and pay for any of those unpaid claims. And Jim, what else does MASA do?
Honestly, everything. That's the great thing about MASA. No matter what you step into, whether you're local, whether you're traveling, whether you're dealing with grandchildren and they're with you, whether you need return transportation, whether you need mortal remains returned following an event, whether you need organ transport or organ recipient transport. I mean, honestly, everything you could imagine that you could possibly incur a third-party bill for, MASA is going to cover it, so you don't have any surprises. Obviously the top 5 things that they paid out in 2022, like Bonnie said, with the little moving ambulance, ground ambulance, 90% of our medical transports come from, our kitchen, our bathroom, our yard, our stairs, from our home. It's where we spend 90% of our time. But unfortunately, we're still getting those $1,230 bills like our teacher in Gahanna. Air ambulance, this is where you see the bills of $30,000, $40,000, and that's just coming from Mansfield to Columbus or Coshocton to Columbus. We'll show you bills in a couple minutes here that are close to $60,000 for members that were a little bit further from home. Return transport, once Medicare gets you to your local hospital or a specialist, they're not bringing you home. I mean, that's on you. If you're, within X amount of miles from home, they're going to make sure they get you, your spouse, whoever's with you back. mortal remains transport, which I mentioned. And I was actually shocked that that was number 4 that they paid out in 2022. And I'm assuming it's because of COVID. I don't know, but I'm assuming. And then car and vehicle, it's probably based on dollars allocated, but car and RV return. And I've actually had several members use this service. They've dealt with an event because they drove to Gatlinburg or drove to Florida, and AAA would be, you know, $2 or $3 grand to get their car back. MASA will put it right on a flatbed, ship it all the way back home, get somebody to drive your RV home, and you don't have to worry about it. So MASA, these are now there's MASA Basic, and this is what most of our members have. It's what Bonnie and I have, what Gary has, but it's going to cover your emergent air transportation. God forbid you need fixed wing aircraft, helicopter, anything to get you in an emergent situation. That $30, $40, $50, $60,000 bill, you have nothing to worry about. Ground ambulance to and from hospitals, secondary, tertiary transport, whatever's required in an emergent situation. Repatriation and recuperation. They do not want you out of the country, out of the state, out of your own town, receiving care if you can get it locally. They're going to bring you home so your spouse is in their bed and you're in a local hospital with your doctor, not somewhere out in Gatlinburg or Florida. Return transportation, getting you home. Non-injury transport. If you deal with, just an illness, COVID, it's not an injury, and you need to be transported to a trauma center or somewhere else, just like the gal in the little video in the beginning, they're going to cover that for you. Otherwise, Medicare would not, major medical would not. Escort transportation. If you want to bring a spouse, loved one, son, daughter with you, they'll make sure that person's with you. If you're flying somewhere, it's a big deal. Minor children or grandchildren return. You take your grandkids on vacation, something happens, you don't have to worry about them. MASA will come get them with a qualified attendee that meets the family and escort the kids back to the commercial airport nearest their residential zip code to make sure you guys can focus on each other and the family are back with mom and dad. Your vehicle return, which I mentioned it, mortal remains return. Unfortunately, this does happen. Organ retrieval, organ recipient transport. So if the transplant team is better where your organ's coming from, they'll offer to fly you and a guest to the better transplant team versus the organ to your local trauma center. And then it's worldwide coverage. Again, like I said, they're not going to Syria, Ukraine. They will go to Russia right now, but they're still not going to Cuba. And Bonnie, I know you're a huge fan of this and you've had some retirees that have used this bracelet.
I am, Jim, because with the 5-year and the lifetime memberships with MASA, they actually receive a My ID bracelet. I wear mine all the time. It's got the little QR code on the back, and many of you out there, may have actually used this while you were still on the job and found this on one of your patients. But obviously, with this piece of the program, you can go to a website, put your name, your picture, your emergency contacts, your doctors, your medical conditions, your medications. And then when a first responder shows up to scoop you up out of the middle of the backyard, like in Jim's case, the neighbors called 911 and they got the lady out of the front bushes. All you have to do is scan that QR code, and then all of their information is right there. So it really helps save that valuable time in the golden hour. And again, that comes with the program if you do have the 5-year or the lifetime. And just remember, folks, again, the purpose of today is to make sure you're aware of potential gaps. If you do have another program in place, something to compare it to. But many of our retirees just love MASA because it really truly is the best coverage available. There's a whole laundry list, and Jim is about to show you too. We even have an enhanced benefit now, or a MASA 2.0, even, if you will. But just remember, this does cover you from home, U.S. travel, international, ground, which again, that's what they're paying the most bills for, is that ground travel, and then air. And just remember, because you're a member of Police and Fire Retirees, they have a negotiated rate that's 40% less, and MASA will waive their membership application fee of $60. So truly, here's one more way that your police and fire retirees are helping to take care of you and your nest egg. And then, you might be saying, okay, well, this all sounds great, but, usually things that sound this great, there's a hefty price tag. Again, it is affordable. It's a great peace of mind to have. Jim and I both have it. I've actually used it. My son totaled his truck back in 2020, right before the pandemic hit. The local township came, we own a farm, we pay our taxes, you'd think. But after they transported him 2.3 miles to the local hospital, I received a bill for $688.10. First thing, mom mode, I kind of freaked out a little bit, but then I was like, wait a second, I have that peace of mind. I have that protection. I simply scanned and emailed the bill to MASA, and they paid the entire amount, because that was going to be my responsibility because I had not met my deductible for the year. So that was nice. They actually helped me pay the money toward my annual deductible. So again, folks, to have the basic MASA, it's $27 per month for just an individual plus a spouse or the family plan. If you still have kids at home under the age of 26, that would be $35 a month. You can do a 5-year or even just, protect against any inflation and buy the program outright with the lifetime plan. A single membership would be $2,900 or a family membership would be $3,900. And Jim, like I said, that's the basic plan. But with all the things that's changed in the world and really with our family structures and everything, MASA listened. So tell us about the exciting, 2.0 program with MASA.
Yeah, like we mentioned, MASA's been around since 1974, and their plan really hasn't changed. I mean, the core base of the plan is fantastic, but during the COVID, we had more than several retirees reach out and say, hey, wouldn't it be nice if MASA covered this? Wouldn't it be nice if MASA covered that? Well, MASA responded and went out to all of their members and said, hey, what are the things that you guys wish were out there? And in January of 2023, 90 days ago, they launched what they call Shield, which is kind of MASA Plus or MASA Enhanced. So everything we went over on the left is MASA Basic. And then on the right is the new Enhanced. Now, there's only 2 or 3 things that I think are crazy good about it. The others are just, benefits. But the COVID quarantine expense protection, if you're a traveler or worried about, COVID, I was just on vacation and God forbid had something happened. The place I was in was, $400 a night. If they quarantined me there and I had to spend another 10 nights there, I couldn't afford it. This plan will actually cover those quarantine expenses while traveling if that were to happen to you. This is the other one I love. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren protection. So over on the left with MASA Basic, if you're with a grandchild, they're with you, they're going to escort that grandchildren back to the commercial airport or, nearest their home zip code and get them safe. This is actually going to protect and cover all of their emergent medical transport needs, that they have, thus impacting your kids or their parents' deductibles and taking care of those. It's a wonderful, especially if you have several grandchildren. And then
Jim, Jim, if I can just jump in, one example with that, we've actually had a retiree already use this. They lived here, their grandkids lived in the Seattle area. One of them got hurt in a soccer game, I believe it was. They were transported, to their local hospital, got the ambulance bill because again, the parents hadn't met the deductible for the year. Because they were covered here under the MASA Shield program, that grandchild's transportation bill to the closest hospital will actually be covered by the grandparents' MASA program. So, just a phenomenal benefit, something, that's new. But we have so many grandparents that want to make sure that they can care for their grandkids and their great-grandkids also. So Jim, go ahead.
Yeah. And the other thing that we actually got a lot of calls, and I have the last 10 years, is someone would be taken from the hospital to a rehab center or from a nursing home to rehab and just a general non-emergent medical transport. And they would say, hey, Jim, is this covered? And unfortunately, it's not an emergent situation. But because of that, survey, the enhanced includes hospital to rehab, nursing, long-term care, home health care, transportation coverage. So it's not going to take your doctor every visit or your dentist every visit, but it's going to take care of those rehab visits and anything's affiliated with your rehab and getting back on your feet. Again, would normally be on you. And I believe those are about $180 a pop. Extended hospital stay, it includes expense coverage, hospital private room upgrade. So if you're in with somebody else, you can say, hey, I've got MASA, they'll give you a private room. MASA will pay the difference. companion return transportation coverage, and then immediate local and visitor transportation coverage. With MASA Basic, if you're in a hospital for more than 7 days out of town, they're going to fly anybody you want to come be with you. They can stay a day, a week, a month, however they need to. With Enhanced, they're not only going to cover the transportation to get them to you, but they're going to cover their lodging, their food, any incidental expenses they incur while caring for you until you can all two get back, to wherever your home destination is. And then medical payment advisors, some of that when you do deal with, $20,000 to $100,000 in bills, somebody that will help you navigate that and help you understand what you are truly eligible for, or what, obviously, what we can get paid for you. And should you unfortunately use these services, God forbid, they total somewhere around $165,000. Bonnie?
And so again, you actually have two options now to take care of the problem at hand. You can either do the MASA Basic, which we explained a few slides ago, or you can opt to get the MASA Shield program. So the MASA Shield, for an individual would be $39 a month, lifetime of $3,900, or to cover you and a spouse and family members, that would be $49 a month and $4,900 for the lifetime. And just remember, folks, you've got two different plans you can choose from. We've also given you a lot of great information today, talking about why this is such a problem, because obviously there's been changes to Medicare. Some of you may not have realized those changes. So we do encourage you, because we just talked about the one little piece of medical transportation today. There's obviously many other things that have happened. So we do encourage you to take out your phone, do the QR code, schedule a benefits review with Jim and I, so we can answer those individual questions for you. Or, you can either email or call one of us. And, we're more than happy to sit down and make sure that you understand your benefits. But just know that, today we've talked about how Medicare works with medical transportation. We've given you tips on if you do have a Medicare Advantage plan, review those charges, in network and out of network. Maybe you do have a program already in place to take care of medical transportation. Please review that to make sure, are there mileage limits? Does it only cover a helicopter ride and not the ground ambulance? Will it cover other family members, your vehicle, your pets? So, we've given you a lot of information today, so you can really evaluate, this problem that can be a huge crack to your nest egg. And talking about nest egg, Jim, next month on April 18th, when we do our Teaching Tuesday, we will be talking about protecting your nest egg. So we do encourage everyone to join us again next month. And again, you can go to the PFRO website. Under the events, we have our webinars on there. All of our webinars are listed. You can click on that and register for next month. Jim, is there anything else we need to cover today?
I think we're good. Gary,
Okay.
We appreciate your update. Appreciate your joining us, and look forward to seeing everybody third Tuesday of next month.
Thank you all. Thank you for your service.
Thanks. Bye-bye now.